Byrne, all right, I know Dr. Karl has been a big influence on our lives. However, we need to be professional in this interview, okay?
Okay, I'll go. I'll focus. Let's get into it.
Oh, come on down. Hey, Dr. Byrne, Dr. Wade, come on down.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, he called us doctor. We're not worthy. We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
How hard this was to research and try and get it really like it was really well. I don't know
Our next guest needs no introduction, however deserves one. In 2006, he was named Australian Skeptic of the Year, and in 2012 was named a National Living Treasure. He's written 40 books with his latest, Karl, the Universe and Everything, which is out now. Please welcome a person who has not just influenced us, but also thousands, if not millions of others, Dr. Karl!
Insert drum roll. Actually, it's 43 books, sorry.
43, is it?
Yeah,
Man.
between this afternoon, I wrote another. Yeah, no, just kidding. but I am starting on number 44 now.
44 now.
Yeah, so I did a story about how every day in Australia, cats kill 1 million birds.
Oh,
Every day.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That is huge.
Yeah, that's a huge number. And working my way through wonderful things for the next book.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And I can see how by correcting me, that's why you got Australian Skeptic of the Year too.
Well, I like to stick to the facts, but on the other hand, it makes you pedantic and boring and unlikable, so I won't correct you anymore.
Oh, come on, Dr. Karl, everyone loves you.
No, you've got to stick to the facts, though.
I'm really happy for you to correct us as much as you'd like.
And
that's what we're about.
I have made mistakes in my various books, and if anybody finds a mistake in my book, please let me know. Just ring me at the University of Sydney, and if you're the first person, I'll send you an autographed copy of the next book when it comes out. There's always mistakes in the books, because you always make mistakes. If you don't make a mistake, you don't make anything. And so whenever the Amish make a quilt, or whenever the Muslims make a prayer rug, they always deliberately put a mistake to show that only God, Allah, insert deity of choice, is perfect, and everybody else, humans, makes a mistake.
See, this is why everyone loves you.
Oh, no,
this
no,
is
no.
why, Dr. Karl, everyone loves you, man.
I'm not worthy, man.
Well, I've got some questions I'd like to
lay them on me.
with
Now
you,
we're
if that's
down to
all
the
right.
serious stuff. Hit me with the nitty-gritty, man.
Well, like recently, my wife and I, we've just had a baby, and
Oh, how old is the baby?
she's about 2 months now. 2 months, little cutie, little round thing, so she takes after her dad, obviously.
And so she's still paralysed. It's around 6 months that they stop being paralysed, and the way you know it is you put them on the bed and then suddenly you hear this thump as they hit the floor.
Yeah, she actually rolled over for the first time last night, and
You're
she's just
kidding.
started smiling. Yeah,
Oh,
she,
wait.
she was born the size of an average 6-week-old, so she was a big girl.
Wow. So what you can do to talk with her is to firstly realise that her brain is working, even though she's got neuromuscular immature innervation of her larynx, and also the anatomy is wrong, so she can't speak.
Yeah, she's having a crack though. She
can do
has a lot
sign
of
language.
vocalizations, sign language.
Yeah, you can, within a couple of weeks, you can get up to 20, 30 words with her.
Oh, excellent.
You're like pointing at the mouth means get the milk machine over here. Pointing at the bum means clean this up, Dad. And you can get a good sign language going with her, and you won't end up with that sense of frustration that I had with my kids when I didn't have a breast to feed them, but I couldn't talk with them.
Yeah,
in
okay.
the first 6 months, year, 2 years of life.
Wow, excellent. I'm definitely going to go home
Yeah.
now. Experiment's
books
the
on it.
wrong word, isn't it? Experiment with the child. Well, look, one of the chapters in your latest book talked about your favourite organ was in fact the uterus.
Yes.
Now, because of the amazing things in it, such as bringing a new life in the world, while I agree the uterus is amazing, after watching my wife go through childbirth, I am somewhat thankful I personally don't have a uterus.
Although it does have a magical property, which it can regenerate itself afresh. And so with regard to skin, if once the skin has been stretched, it doesn't come back all the way, but a uterus does. And a uterus, if we could learn that for the skin, then we'd have much better skin in older age.
That would be great, yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, I really interrupted the story.
That's not right. Look, the more I learn, the better. But I was sort of thinking, in your book, you talked about creating an artificial woman, an artificial uterus. So how far are we really from being able for females to make that choice that maybe they don't want to have that experience of childbirth anymore either?
Well, they can do it by paying money and having a surrogate carry the baby for you, as you would know if you read the gossip pages and see that's what Kim Kardashian is doing. But what they're trying to do with the first stage of the artificial uterus is to get the baby over that stage of being born too early with immature lungs. Prematurity is a terrible situation and leads to all sorts of conditions in babies. And so if you can keep them in the uterus for a bit longer, or even an artificial uterus, and let them just grow for another couple of weeks, you improve the survival rate enormously. And so the first stage is just to be able to limp them along when they're basically grown, and just limp them along for a couple of weeks longer, from say 31 weeks to 33 or 35. It makes a huge difference in survival. And then obviously the next stage, which we cannot do at the moment, is to do the whole growing of the baby. And that involves, on a virtual minute-by-minute basis, changing the blood flow and the hormones and the chemicals and the nutrients and the pressure delivered to the growing baby. And we've got no idea of that at the moment. But if you've got a baby that's most of the way there, well, we just sort of keep it with a few basic minerals, keep it supplied with blood, keep it supplied with oxygen, and let the lungs mature. And that's all we're using we only use the artificial uterus on lambs. Haven't managed to do it yet on humans.
I've seen the photos of that on the internet. It's kind of creepy looking. Very,
it is.
Sort of Matrix almost.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, with regard to the Matrix, just last week there was a paper finally disproving the possibility that we could be living in a Matrix.
Oh, that's quite relieving.
Yeah. So there was a series of papers by physicists and philosophers in around 2003 saying, well, how do we know that we're not living in a Matrix? And offering all sorts of scenarios and suggestions and ideas in mathematics. But just a few weeks ago, somebody came out with a paper showing that to simulate the matrix of the universe, you'd need a computer several thousand times bigger than the universe, which is impossible to fit into the universe because it's bigger than the universe. So therefore the matrix doesn't exist. Or maybe that's just what they want us to believe.
I like it. So, also in your book, you suggest air conditioning is inherently sexist, and it favours a male's dress sense, and with generally higher positions, which are obtained by males in corner offices, obviously near the windows, and as well the male metabolic rate. Do you think sexism spans into science as well, and how can we overcome this discrepancy between males and females doing science?
My God, a two-part question. I can't even remember the first part. So, yes, firstly, the air conditioning standard was based on a male wearing a three-piece suit with covered shoes, and that included a vest. And the air conditioning ducts are usually near the centre of the building, and the males, in their superior positions of power, usually have the corner offices. So you have really cold air, so that by the time it gets to the corner office, it's at a reasonable temperature, and in between the women, with their lesser amounts of clothing, freeze and have to take a cardigan to work. So my wife works at the hospital. The aircon there has been set so cold that in summer, everybody has to wear not only cardigans, but put on heaters. Now, that is such a waste of energy in a hospital. And if you talk to the management, no success. So, boo the patriarchy. Now, secondly, the first part of your question was...
It was, so how do we stop, how do we overcome this discrepancy between males and females doing science? Because obviously science appears to be a more male-dominated field.
It is. I would follow the example of Gandhi and lead by sitting in the background. So do the example, promote more females to higher positions. But it's so much more complicated because it's inherent in this male-dominated society in which we live. So if you have a bunch of men and women in a meeting, only when the number of women gets to 80%, do the men stop interrupting, and do the women get equal talking time. So it's fundamental. The first stage is to realise it, and the second stage is then to do something about it. So just by talking about it, making it more aware, we're doing better. But it's not enough, and we've just got to keep trying. Yeah. The lesson I get here is from being involved with various battles over the years, like, for example, stopping apartheid in Africa by turning up at a football match and yelling at the poor old Springboks, and it wasn't their fault, and getting your fair share of abuse and getting beaten up. And then also with regard to trying to get Aborigines counted in the census and then being allowed to vote, and you lose every single battle except the last one. Right?
Yeah.
Before you win that last battle and the law gets changed, you've lost 100 battles. Yeah. We're still in the stage of losing battles. So I'll lose a battle tomorrow, and I'll lose a battle a day after tomorrow. But at some stage, will win, and women will get equal rights. I mean, it's just crazy that you throw away half the brain power of the nation by not letting women have equal access to everything. But then it goes on to justice and bullying. Mate, it's just wrong. We've got to fix it. We're starting now. Let's keep working harder. I don't know how to fix it, by the way.
Yeah, well, I guess as you said, we've just got to keep trying.
Well, we'll go into politics, Wade.
Yeah,
apparently,
what you said. Go into politics, man. Right, be on the inside of the tent urinating out rather than on the outside urinating in. But it's a hard row because if you're a politician, people will accuse you of being crooked. Then they'll try to bribe you. And then you'll find yourself at 6 o'clock in the morning at the raising of the flag at some RSL and 11 o'clock at night at some high school dance, and your time is not your own. And people will both laugh at you like you laughed at the idea of being a politician, which is the cleverest thing they ever did. I highly recommend that you read the book Econobabble by Richard Dennis, Denniss. You can read it in an afternoon. It's got a nice yellow cover like mine, and it's got big print, and it opens your mind. Like, remember recently there's been this big fight about the National Disability Insurance Scheme. They're talking about $500 million, $1/10 billion. Okay, according to Richard Dennis, every year, out of a budget of $1,500 billion, the Australian government gives away $135 billion to companies for free.
Yeah.
Follow the money. The politicians are not economists. They claim that they are, but they're not. If you ask the economists about it, and recently the Minister Frydenberg said that he was going to withdraw the $3 billion subsidy on renewables, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Guess how much the subsidy, or rather the word they prefer to use is investment, even though they never get it back, they still call it an investment. Guess how much the subsidy/investment is for fossil fuels each year? Yes, you're right, $44 billion. So he's going to take away $3 billion from renewables, but still leave the $44 billion there. So just follow the money, do economics, and run for politics.
I've always thought economics was a bit dodgy. I spend a lot of time ragging on economics in our podcast.
True, but what you want, ultimately, the big picture, is a better life for your children. Yeah. So when I go to vote at the local primary school, I'm not voting for what will be good for me in the next election, in the next quarter year, half year, 3 years. I'm voting for what will be good for my children. And I'm finding remarkably little to vote for.
You'll understand when you have kids, Wade.
He's been saying this for the last 2 months. It's like, as a father, Wade, well, and I'm like, not again. But I noticed that one thing, one area of science which you speak a lot about is climate science. And I know in one of your books, I can't remember which one because you've got so many, but I read you dedicate it to the climate scientists and their battle, in trying to get, I guess, a nation to accept the science and act on the science, yet they cop more criticism than any other field.
It's funny, isn't it? So if you look at the Murdoch press around the world is perfectly fine with the science of geology, metallurgy, pediatric oncology, histology, pathology, any ology you care to name. However, there's one branch of science in which they insist on giving equal column inches to the opposition every time an announcement is made. So, for example, with space science, whenever NASA launches a rocket, or the European Space Agency, they don't have an equal number of column inches in their newspapers or on Fox TV saying, well, actually, the Earth is flat. God put an alabaster dome over it. To compensate for the fact that it's white, he arranged it that some secret invisible people would go and put a blue carpet there at night. And the stars, they're actually little fireflies that God put there. They do not get the same number of column inches to any space launch. Only on climate science they insist on giving the same number of column inches to people who are, and there's a simple word for it, wrong. So people worked out that a thing called global warming, greenhouse effect could happen over a century ago. A few people thought they could find it in the weather record in the 1930s. Maybe they could. It was a very soft signal then. By 1973, the world's largest reinsurance company, Munich Re, said, as far as we're concerned, following the money, global warming, they called it the greenhouse effect back then, is real, and we're factoring that into our into our insurance premiums in 1973. In 1988, the climate scientists said, 98, 99, blow me down. We, as a body, are convinced that it's real, in the same way that metallurgists say, if you want to turn red iron ore into shiny stainless steel, you heat it up, you get rid of the oxygen, add a bit of carbon, add 80% of chrome, 8% of nickel, bingo. There's no disagreement with how you make stainless steel in the Murdoch press. But beginning around 1990, we have the emails. In 1989 and 88, we have the emails in the New York Times reproduced from Exxon and the other big fossil fuel companies saying, well, there's this greenhouse effect. What are we going to do? We're going to turn ourselves from a petrol company, an oil company, into an energy company, still delivering energy, but by a different way, or are we going to cover it up? They went for cover-up. The emails are quite clear about it, and since then they've got certain parts of the media on their side, and they've been covering it up, and it's your children who are going to suffer for it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're already seeing the extreme events coming through. We've been seeing it for years. However, the climate scientists have been attacked so often that they're incredibly scared to say, look, this is what's happening. They're being ultra-conservative about their predictions and not including the positive feedback effects, which are real and which will make things a lot worse.
I don't think I could be a bigger fan of yours, Dr. Karl, but Kenya's showing that I could be wrong. Yeah.
Well, that's the way you fix it is by going into politics. So let me give you the example. Okay, question without notice. Does the date 7th of November 1941 mean anything to you?
7th of November, that does
1941.
Well, that's a bit before our time.
Jesus Christ was before your time.
Yeah, this is
So
true.
were dinosaurs. You know about dinosaurs?
I do know about dinosaurs, but I don't have any specific dates on them.
Yeah, 220 million years ago to 65. Getting back to the 7th
I
of
don't know,
November.
but I don't have the date. It's 1941, so that would have been beginning of the war. Was that when Japan, or was that Pearl Harbor?
Pearl Harbor Day.
Pearl Harbor.
Within 9 months of Pearl Harbor Day, the number of motor vehicles made for the domestic market in America by the huge number of car factories was 0. Within 9 months, they were pumping out huge planes like the B-17, every factory. And so, not every factory was making it, but they had a whole lot of extra factories. And so the B-17, as an example, is this huge thing, 20 by 30 metres. So you get 2 Olympic swimming pools side by side, and it covers them. Weighs 30 tonne. Crew of 10 people, payload of 10 tonnes, will fly Sydney to Perth and back again on a load of fuel. Enormously complicated thing. And the car factories were no longer car factories, and they were pumping out these B-17s at the rate of not 1 a month, 1 an hour. Now, it turns out that there are machines and if we built 25 million of them, the Swiss are already building these machines. If we built 25 million of them, we could pull back out of the atmosphere an entire years' worth of human-generated carbon dioxide. And 25 million is a big number, but we make 100 million cars every year. The only thing stopping us from reversing global warming, from first stopping it and then reversing it, is political will. Did I mention you should run for politics? No. So, with regard to stopping global warming, we can stop pumping carbon dioxide into the air for electricity within 10 years. There's no technology stopping us. There's only the political will. Transport is a little bit harder, 15 years. Agriculture, that's going to be about 25, 30 years because agriculture is alive and will fight back. And then we can stop sucking back the extra carbon dioxide and actually bring down the Earth's carbon dioxide levels. And it's not just the machines that we would use to pull the carbon dioxide out of the air. We could, for example, and there's lots of research, use our natural vegetation. So if you infect vegetation with a certain fungicide, it makes these little structures in the soil that can suck back tons, hundreds of kilograms of carbon per year out of the atmosphere, and we could use everything back. We have had an example of human activity reducing carbon dioxide in the past. And this is based on an article in the Scientific American about 9 months ago. So around 1500, after the Europeans started wandering into North and South America, when the population of North and South America was about 50 million people, they killed 50 million people. Not all at once. Over the century. So the population sort of went down and they were displaced from where they were. These Spanish writings of the time talk how they would sail up the Amazon, which at its mouth is so wide that if you're in the middle, you can't see either bank. That's how big this river
Yeah.
is. And they were sailing up the Amazon, and they saw cities that made the European cities look like kids' playthings. But the Spanish had superior weapons technology and were able to destroy them. And as a result of the Europeans taking over with their superior weapons technology, as a result of them killing people, the locals stopped doing agriculture. The trees came back and reduced the carbon dioxide level by 6 points, 6 parts per million.
Whoa.
As a result of the genocide on South and North America. So the example is there that we can not only increase carbon dioxide, we can reduce it. And all we need is a political will. I don't know what I should tell
You're
people.
not suggesting genocide, though, are you?
No. Politics. Genocide is horrible and it's bad for living things.
Yeah.
Anyway, so global warming is real. We cause it, and we've got to do something about it now. We're getting to the point of where we can't do the preventive, we've got to do the emergency. So thinking from the point of view of being a medical doctor, it's not the case of, look, Wade, you should do a bit of exercise and do a bit of running. It's sort of, okay, let's shove him into intensive care, let's do this, let's do that, let's just keep him alive for the next 15 minutes, and then we'll see what we can do. We can do something about it. The longer we wait, the more expensive it will be. And here's another question for you without notice, but you can probably guess the answer. Slavery was happening in both the United States and the United Kingdom. They both declared it illegal. Compensation was paid. Okay, as a guess, who was the compensation paid to? The slaves or the slave owners?
Oh, it's definitely the
It's
owners.
the slave owners,
Right.
for sure.
So who is going to get compensation for wrecking our planet? Us humans or the fossil fuel companies?
Yeah.
Don't let it happen.
Yeah.
Don't let
Go
it happen.
into politics.
What he said. I think that's a brilliant idea.
I kind of feel this is a
have
meeting.
brainwashed you.
I kind of feel this, that you guys have teed this meeting up to try and get me to run for politics.
Well, they're very clever the way that if you say to anybody, oh, look, I reckon you should go for politics, the first thing they do is they laugh and say, I couldn't do that. And it's like saying, oh, I couldn't add 2 and 2. That's mathematics. I'm just too stupid to do that. And yet, if you don't, they do.
Yeah.
And they're on the inside of the TV telling you what the latest law is.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay.
This is. I love you, man.
I'm not worthy, but thank you.
All right. Well, look, let's keep on this whole theme. What do you think we as a society, apart from younger people or people such as myself and Wade who are into science, what do we as a society need to do to put science and technology at the forefront of investment? Something like it was during the space race era.
I'm kind of thinking of something I learned from airline pilots. And I really don't like these sort of short, snappy, alliterative messages like level the playing field and all that sort of wanky stuff. But I'll do it anyway because it's really easy. This is the 3 M's. So the first M is to model. And so this pilot who was teaching other pilots to fly and taking them through their exams to get to higher and higher levels, whenever he was in the cockpit with another pilot and he was the captain, whenever he would leave, whenever the other pilot said, I want to go to the toilet, he said, yeah, hang on a second, I'll put on my oxygen mask. Now, normally if something goes bad, there's 2 of them in the cockpit, and at least one of them will get the oxygen mask. But what if he just gets thrown around, there's only one person, and he doesn't get the oxygen mask, he gets knocked unconscious? He. Right, so he would model putting on the oxygen mask. That's 90% of the time. And then he would mentor. If they didn't do it and say, look, Wade, it's probably a good idea, put on the oxygen mask when you're in the cockpit by yourself in case you have a sudden loss of pressure. And then only 1% of the time would he manage and say, look, mate, you're not doing it, put on the oxygen mask. You might need it only once in your whole life, but it'll make the difference then. So what I'm saying to people is follow like Gandhi. Be the message. Do the whole science thing. Make it fun and make it accurate. And everybody does it a different way. I don't know what you can do after that. By the way, I'm very happy to help you and give you a guided tour through the ABC, and we can have a whole day together, and you get free tea and coffee as well.
Oh, wow.
sounds pretty good.
That
Yeah.
sounds
Nothing.
awesome. You know we're going to chase you up on that.
Sure,
Right?
sure. You got my phone number? Ring me. Don't email, just ring me.
Okay.
Okay. Wow. Thanks very much,
Thank you
Dr.
very
Karl.
much,
my duty.
Dr. Karl.
God, I've got to say, listeners, he is fantastic. He's
Oh,
just
no,
like
no,
he
no,
presents
no,
on
no.
TV.
Yeah.
No. I'm not with him.
We've met people in the past and like famous scientists and things like that, and vast majority of them have been absolutely awesome, and some of them you're like, oh, you don't meet your idols.
Oh.
It's not the case. If you get an opportunity to meet Dr. Karl, make sure you take that up, everyone.
And his new book, don't forget the new book.
Absolutely. Karl, the Universe and Everything. Make sure you grab that. We've been lucky enough to be sent a couple copies
know.
and given it a good read, and this will be my 7th or 8th Dr. Karl book I've now ploughed through.
And if you find a mistake, ring me and you get a free copy of the next one.
Now I know that, I'm going to plough through all of those books again.
They've all got mistakes in it. Like,
They
there was one
fine-tooth
book
comb.
on the back cover it had, and nobody noticed this for years. Normally you have, this book could not have been written without the help of blah, blah, blah. This book could not have been written with the help. Nobody noticed it for years.
Oh, that's brilliant.
I'm going to see if I've got that one now.
Science Bazaar 2,
Yeah,
1989.
1989. Oh, that's
something
probably why
like
I
that.
don't have it. Yeah, I would have been 3.
Ah.
Quite young then. Now, I noticed in this book, in a lot of your other books, you've dedicated it to certain people, but this book you've dedicated to life itself, all of life. In the book, you talk about how finding life in the universe. For me personally, that is the single greatest unanswered question in science:
Wouldn't it be
is there
weird?
life out there?
Yeah.
It'd be amazing. I love that. And you talked about Enceladus, the moon of Saturn, and finding life in there. I want to know, what do you think the life on Enceladus could be like?
I reckon it'll be some sort of symmetrical, multicellular critter, like a fish, like a crab, but God knows what'll have happened. Like, either it'll have the same DNA as us, which means, oh my God, how did it get from there to here? Or it'll have completely different DNA, in which case you're thinking, wow, life could have arisen many times.
Could it
in
have
the
got
universe.
from here to there?
Yeah, it can. There's ways for stuff to go around, like they've found rocks from Mars in the Antarctic and in Egypt. So stuff does travel around through the solar system. And the one that I'm really curious about are the Symbiodidium, I think that's the right pronunciation, pronunciation, of the little critters that live inside coral. So there's a symbiotic relationship where they each have waste and they each eat each other's waste and they get on just fine. And the zooxanthellae, the Symbiodidium, there's about 1 million of these tiny, tiny things inside each cubic centimetre of coral animal. So think about it like the tip of your little finger. There's 1 million of these little critters. Number one, they do photosynthesis by a pathway that no other living creature on Earth does. Number two, instead of having 4 rungs or codons or base pairs in their DNA ladder of life, they've got 5.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
That's bizarre, isn't
That's
it?
bizarre. 5?
Yeah.
The only creature we've
What's the
found...
letter?
What's going... I don't know what they call it. But normally it's A, T, C, and G.
Yeah.
But it's got 5 instead of 4. What the heck is
That's
going?
weird.
That is weird.
And what does the 5th one pair with, though?
Don't know. I haven't followed that up.
Yeah.
Because I've been too late.
Do I get a free book 'cause you don't know?
I don't know everything.
not a correction,
mistakes.
right?
Mistakes to get a free book. There's millions of things I don't know, like the colour of your socks or underwear in your drawer at home. I don't know that either.
I'm not wearing socks or underpants, Dr. Karl.
Oh, are you the new hip man? Apparently in Italy now they're wearing dress shoes without socks. I'm so out of touch.
Oh, that would smell.
Yeah.
That would smell.
Oh, maybe they've got really good
They're
leather
pretty trendy
technology.
in Italy.
Oh,
It still smells.
Italy's
You
an
can't stop
amazing
you.
country. It's got more leaders since the Second World War than there have been years, and they're still a major economic powerhouse, and they've got really nice food.
It's delicious
Can't
food.
take away that food.
Now, we've got some questions from our followers, if you wouldn't mind
Later,
answering a
Mommy.
few of those. All right, the first one comes from Craig Porter, who asks, what is your favourite thing to research?
Oh, anything. Basically, I just get blown out by discovering stuff that I didn't know was there or that I didn't know. So, for example, how to deal with being late all the time, or how do animals that have toxin in their bodies avoid killing themselves with that toxin, or how do flesh-eating bacteria actually do the dissolving of the flesh. And there's just all this science pouring down, or that recent one about how just recently we've begun to invent the field of gravitational wave astronomy. So what appeals to me most, look, anything to do with any branch of science, providing it's something that I can pass off as a 3-minute did you know in a pub story. But to get that 3 minutes, it normally takes me about 5 hours.
That's all right. I'm sure I could spend 5 hours with you, Dr. Karl.
Zara, one of our other listeners, Zara J. Bending, she asks, what are your 3 top tips on effective science communication?
Well, Zara, give me a ring at the University of Sydney and I'll give you a guided tour and then we'll sort of chat along the way. Number 1, this has been really good advice I got. Avoid opinions, stick to the facts.
Okay.
Avoid opinions, stick to the facts. You'll find yourself tempted to go in for opinions. Avoid it. Be strong. Just stick to the facts, and you'll find that it'll pay off in a long time, over time. Number 2, if you don't make mistakes, you don't make anything. So do the best you can, and be prepared for the fact that you are going to make mistakes. And as soon as you make a mistake, and you're sure that you have made a mistake, own up to it immediately. Be quite open about it. Don't try to cover it up. Yeah, I made a mistake, because the motto of the scientist is, and I don't know who first said this, I didn't, is that the scientist holds their theories on the tips of their fingertips so that the merest breath of fact will blow them away. So that, for example, with the Big Bang, we've got 3 major bits of evidence for the Big Bang being real, which are the hydrogen-helium ratio of atoms in the universe, the 3-degree radiation, and the expansion of the universe. But if something comes up and tips that over, you don't hang on to it. You just say, mate, it's just wrong. And then you go for the one which has got more data backing it up. And the 3rd bit of advice, in public buildings, the toilets are usually near the elevators. And so if you're really busting, look for the elevators and you find a public toilet nearby.
That's not a bad tip at all, actually.
Read. Oh, yeah. The other thing is,
Keep us out of the alleyways,
number 3.5. I'm following the example here of Steve Poltz, P-O-L-T-Z, amazing performer. Go and see him and he'll teach you that you don't know much about performing skills. I try to catch him every time he appears so I can learn more from him. And he belongs to a little book writing club, a songwriting club, where they send each other a phrase or a single word every day, and within 24 hours they have to write a song and they have to repeat it every day of the week, every week of the year. And so he came on and said, since I saw you yesterday, I got an email with the words, fist fight in the vegan brunch bar. So here's my song. Right, so my 3rd bit of advice, although don't forget the public toilet one, 3rd bit of advice is just do it. Do it over and over and over again. Don't be like the band who get a hit single and then spend 6 months in the studio polishing up something that's no good. Just churn through it. Just do it over and over and over again. And just do it and do it and do it. And you'll make mistakes and you'll get better with time.
Excellent, that's good. Well, we had a lot of people ask this question actually, and it was, where do you get your shirts from?
My wife Mary makes them. It takes 3 hours with a 4-thread overlocker with differential feed. I get 2 pockets. You can see over here, I've got 2 pockets.
2 pockets, yes.
Yeah, most people only get 1 pocket or no pocket. No. You see, the thing about clothing is that it was necessary for humans to evolve to have clothing, because we had to lose the ability to have body hair.
Some of us did.
Yeah. So
Byrne's pretty hairy.
Byrne's not that hairy. So we had to lose our body hair so that the protein that came out in the body hair and was lost forever could then be redirected into the brain. But the downside of that was that we had to invent clothing. But with a bigger brain, we went down a different evolutionary pathway from every other creature.
That's
and here
awesome.
we are today.
I had no idea.
No. So therefore, that was one of the many evolutionary mutations that had to happen. So with clothing, we have a long history in Homo sapiens and in Homo...
Erectus?
Is Neanderthal
or
a Homo?
Yeah, Homo neanderthalis.
Okay, so Homo Neanderthal, of art, of culture, of decorating the cave, of doing stuff for no reason than to make it look pretty and to have jewellery. And so clothing is part of that. Why should women have all the fun wearing the good clothing? So my wife, Mary, makes all the clothing, and it's cotton, of course, as well. And it has a long sleeve. I'll let you in on a secret, don't tell anybody. The reason I have long sleeves is so that when I go on stage, I've got the sleeves rolled down. And then, without mentioning that I'm rolling up my sleeves, I roll up my sleeves while talking to the audience. And this gives them a secret subconscious signal I'm about to go to work. Don't tell anybody.
Did you do it with us today?
I noticed your sleeves are half up. Yeah, I'm not sure if they were up when I got
no,
here.
No,
I'm
no,
curious now.
You guys aren't work, you're fun.
Oh, excellent. Oh, that's
thanks,
lovely.
Doctor. All right. This one actually comes from your latest book. It's obviously your book's full of interesting scientific facts, but one of my favourite was the story of George de Hevesy hiding 2 Nobel Prizes in the solution from the Nazis. Now, would you care to elaborate on this remarkable tale of how science was used not only to protect Nobel Prizes, but to save the lives of the scientists involved?
So the scientists were unfortunate enough to be living in Germany when Germany went temporarily mad. This is the country that gave us Beethoven and Mozart, and it just went temporarily mad. It can happen to any of us. They got stricken by various forces, and Nazism took over, and 2 scientists who were there, who were Jewish or Jewish sympathizers, were unfortunate enough to be inside Nazi Germany and doing research and to have won the Nobel Prize. And so to protect their Nobel Prizes from being confiscated from them for the war effort, they did the strictly illegal thing under the laws of the time in Nazi Germany of sending them out of the country. And if they'd been caught doing that, they could well have been executed. They ended up in Denmark. Then the Nazis invaded Copenhagen in Denmark. And if the gold medals were found, that would have been leading to the death of the German scientists. And so the people in Denmark realised that what they should do is get rid of the gold medals in some way. Well, the first thing you ever learn if you ever talk to a forensic person is you cannot hide a hole in the ground. So burying in the ground doesn't work, because you can come to a hole in the ground that was put there 1,000 years ago, and you can say, the dirt there is different from the dirt there. This is a new thing. I'll keep digging and find out what's at the bottom of it. Humans have done this hole in the ground probably. And so they suddenly realised that what they could do is dissolve the gold into aqua regia, which does the dissolving of gold by a sort of 2-legged weird chemical process where it only strips off a tiny number of gold atoms, and then the other acid comes in and turns them into something else. Then the first acid strips off a tiny amount of gold atoms, and it just keeps on going in a sort of 2-handed tag wrestling match, and eventually dissolved all the gold into this sort of orangey liquid into a glass jar that looked like it just had water in it, but it was suspiciously heavy. Yeah. The Nazis come rolling into town, or are in town. They then put them on the top shelf and leave them there for the whole war. The Nazis come through, blah, blah, liquid, forget it, walk past. And at the end of the year, they do some basic chemistry and then reverse the reaction, get the gold back, send it over to Sweden, where the metals are then remanufactured and given back. So it shows that with a bit of basic, or at least acidic chemistry, you can fight the forces of evil.
Wow. I was reading that, I'm like, this is awesome. And it was just amazing how, like, that just, that bit of gold just meant so much to them. And even if it was out of shape and if it was in a solution, it didn't matter. It was what it symbolized. And they used science to just, to protect it and to protect that attachment they had to it. It's just awesome.
And in the last few weeks, we've discovered more proof of the pathway by which gold is manufactured. So when the universe started off, all we had was hydrogen and helium in a 90% atom ratio to 10%. And then the stars started burning, creating what are called metals. Now, the astronomers and astrophysicists are really weird here. Firstly, they don't measure distances in light years. They measure it in parsecs, which is about 3 and a bit light years, even though Star Wars 1 doesn't think so. And it thinks that a parsec is a measure of time rather than a measure of distance. And number 2, they classify anything heavier than helium as a metal. Oxygen is a metal. Neon is a metal. fluorine is a metal. It's the astronomers, right? And these so-called metals get made in stars. So when the universe starts up, you've got hydrogen and helium. And then to make everything up to iron, that happens via nuclear fission, where smaller atoms are fused together to make nuclear fusion, where smaller atoms are fused together to make bigger atoms. A plus B gives you C plus an absolute shirtload of energy. And you keep on going and you run out of grunt at iron. You can't go any higher. But when stars explode, we thought that firstly, the part of their process, they turn into a red supergiant, that stars could manufacture gold, or anything heavier than iron, including gold. They could manufacture gold by neutron capture in red giant atmospheres a bit, but they thought that the main mechanism was, number two, a supernova where stars explode and the atoms, the atoms like iron and fluorine or whatever, are rammed into each other to make heavier atoms. And now they're more sure that the third mechanism happens when they discovered a few weeks ago that when neutron stars run into each other, that they can make gold that way as well. So that was part of this whole new field of astronomy that was discovered just a few weeks ago. So we'd been picking up...
That's detected the gravitational waves from those two colliding, right?
Well, the gravitational wave story is not as simple as you think. So, firstly, on the 14th of December in the year 2015, Tony Abbott was booted out of power. And then a few hours later, these gravitational waves rippled through the planet. A scientific paper was written. What were the names of the first three authors of the paper? Abbott, Abbott and Abbott. A coincidence? I don't think so. I think that the reason that Tony Abbott left politics was to explore his true love of science. But he was brought up in a whole rugger, ultra male, pretend to be super tough, that he couldn't do girly science. So the only way he'd go back to doing his true love of science was to give up the prime ministerhood. And he's still got to keep going this, pretending what he is, but really he's a very kind, compassionate person. He has to cover it up because he hasn't learned how to open up to his warmer, more sensitive self.
Fact-based self.
Yeah, so we should give him room to move and see what he can truly express. And so all we could do at that stage was pick up the gravitational waves as they hit the Earth, and at that stage we only had 2 gravitational wave detectors. If you had 1 gravitational wave, all you could say is, well, we've got something, probably a gravitational wave. If you got 2 of them, and they pick them up at the right time, well, if you imagine that one of them happens on the side of the Earth closest to the number 1, well, it hears it first, and then allowing for transmission time, the second one hears it, and then you've got these 2 very identical signals just coming out of nowhere. And you say, well, obviously something swept through the Earth, and then you can do a bit of triangulation, or if there's only 2 of them, you can do biangulation. And they were able to narrow it down to a bit of sky about 600 square degrees, which is enormous because the sun and the moon are each about a quarter of a square degree. So this is a huge area of the sky, right? And then they managed to get the third one up. By the way, Australia was offered the choice. The Americans came and said, look, we need a third one to do triangulation. Can we build one in Australia? We'll put up there for free $1 billion worth of stuff, and all these people will work for you, and you have technology and you'll build a new industry. All you have to do is provide the dirt and the fence. You'll never guess what Australia said.
I know I can guess. I think I'm right. No.
No, we said no. Yeah, we said no. And then we got the Virgo running, and then the 2 stars collided, the 2 neutron stars collided, and the Virgo was the third gravitational wave detection station. Now, let me just do a little detour here. Galileo was the second stage of astronomy. So the first stage was naked eye astronomy. You look in the sky and you see this happening. You see, there's little dots are moving in the sky, and then they seem to go backwards, they go forwards, and so you build up a certain amount of knowledge. Then you get a telescope with Galileo, which he didn't invent, but he used, and he looked in the sky and he saw that Venus had phases. Sometimes it looked like a crescent on this side, on that side, the other side. And he looked at Jupiter. There were 4 dots going around Jupiter. Yeah, that's okay. But they changed. One night they'd be here, the next night they'd be somewhere else. And this just tipped over the whole apple cart, because the belief was that the stars were fixed apart from the 7 planets, one of which was a sun, another one was a moon. But and that just tipped over the whole apple cart and gave us all the other sorts of astronomy, which basically looked at electromagnetic radiation moving on the background fabric of space-time. So the electromagnetic radiation was initially light, and then we moved into going one way, ultraviolet and X-ray and gamma ray, and going the other way into infrared, radio, microwave, blah, 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 blah. But they've always been looking at electromagnetic waves. This is the first astronomy that looks at the fabric of space-time itself distorting. And this really blew my mind. To be able to make it work, we humans had to be able to measure a change in distance, not of an atom or of a nucleus or of a proton, but 1/10,000th the diameter of a proton. And to do it, the scientists at CSIRO at Linfield had to work out how to turn a 40-kilogram mirror into a single quantum object. And you'll never guess what the Australian government did to the scientists after they did that. It fired them. Yeah, CSIRO. Yeah, well, we've got the CSIRO run by a climate skeptic. These are interesting times. And so then when the two neutron stars ran into each other, we had three sources of signal. We had the two American ones and the European one. One American one was working perfectly. The other American one, in that 15-second window that the signal came to Earth, went full-scale deflection on its sensor, and they threw away the reading. The computer threw away the reading, but the reading was still there. It said, ignore this. And they went back and they looked at it, and in the middle of this sort of 15-second signal, there's 2 seconds where the thing went full scale, where the measurer went off scale, but they've still got the record. And so they had the second record from there, so they were able to rescue that. And then Virgo is not up to full sensitivity yet, and so it got a reading that on one hand was so hopeless you couldn't do much science with it, but on the other hand, it gave you the timing. And so as a result, we had shrunk the area of sky from 600 square degrees down to 30, and bingo, out go the telescopes. For the first time, we managed to get the telescopes, the electromagnetic ray telescopes, working. And so I think in order, the gamma ray telescope picked up at 1.7 seconds, and then the optical telescopes at about 10 hours, and then the X-ray telescopes at 11 days, and then the radio telescopes at about 15 days. So now we have invented a new form of astronomy, and if you compare the smartphone of 2007 with the smartphone of 2017, the changes that will bring to our society will be much greater than that. And we have no idea what they are, but they're coming.
Wow. This is why I love science. Isn't it? It's an amazing process, all the way from Galileo to now a whole brand new form of astronomy that looks at the whole range of electromagnetic radiation and it'll coordination everywhere.
Yeah, and it'll give us a new toy that we can use in 20 years or whatever. Like, for example, with Einstein, he comes up with his theory of special relativity, and a century later, it's used by slightly inebriated people on a Saturday night to navigate their way to a pizza bar, GPS, to get their healthy filling of saturated fats. And why slightly inebriated people like saturated fats instead of salads, I have no idea. That's a mystery.
I guess the thing I love about science is just the truthfulness and honesty. It's such a honest, truthful pursuit, and I think it's the best way of looking at the universe and making sense of the world around you, and as well, and just dealing with other people, how other people might be feeling, and understanding other people, even looking at neurological science and things like that. It's just such an honest pursuit. And Dr. Karl, you are an amazing person, and you've done so much good for not only myself and Byrne, but
you're going to go into politics, aren't you?
Oh, I feel obliged to now after you've been so good to us.
If Dr. Karl thinks I can do it, and he's right about everything.
No, I'm not. I make mistakes all the time. Yeah. But I thought you were going for the wind-up there, so I was just sort of trying to get in that go for politics, kiddies, because that way you can change the world. Otherwise, we're looking at a 5 to 8 metre ocean level rise by the end of the century when you include the positive feedback loops, which are real.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for taking us on that journey with you, Dr. Karl. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
I would love it. Thank you very much.
For all of the listeners out there, make sure you grab his newest book, which is Karl, the Universe and Everything, but you can catch Karl on Twitter, all over the internet. He's got his own show, Sleek Geeks, which is still around, trodden around YouTube. Dr. Karl is very, very easy to find, and he's very, very open to any questions as well. It's fantastic. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.